That was a rather nice introduction. Makes me very humble. What am I? What am I in our language is obviously welcome. It's a tone of endearment. It's a tone of welcome to country. And I haven't been to Bondi for a long, long time, since my childhood. So it's nice to come back here. And I found you don't drive a car to Bondi anymore. It's not good. In our language, and I'm never afraid to say it. What am I? Nagaya Wugi, Nagaya Wenga Marigo, Gadigal Guri Pemel, Gumada Bienga, Gumada Warangra, Maramarong Tianaganaga, Gadigal Guri Pemel again. Acknowledging this as Gadigal land, it's the land of the clans of the Sydney Basin. We're not Eora. Eora just means of here. Thank you very much. Is it better? Thank you. What I've just done is just asked the female spirits and the male spirits to allow us to walk and talk in this country, and to walk and talk in the plural, to be together. And that's our way of being inclusive. And that's really an interesting way to start the talk. I had a brilliant PowerPoint presentation, but I won't tell you the full story, but I left it at home. So my sincere apologies. So today we're going to have to use a little bit of imagination. But my grandmother used to always say that things were meant to be, and maybe if we can use our minds, we can think about some things very serious about Sydney Harbour. In 1788, I wish our current Prime Minister was our Prime Minister then, because we were assaulted by a heap of boat people. And we had all these illegal immigrants came in. And it's very, very fitting that that story be told about Sydney Harbour today, because the destruction of Sydney Harbour began in February of 1788. Now, the first fleet arrived in January 1788. They parked in what we now call as the cove there. And Tobuggawa, which is the river basin, was inundated by all these ships. Now, the British used to use an interesting thing called a seine. And the seine is where the net's taken out by a rowboat, it's rowed around, and then they'd use this massive big anchor winch to pull the seine in. And they would pull in ton after ton after ton of fish. The first time they used the seine was up around Athol Bay, and that was in February of 1788. They caught a massive amount of fish, and a heap of our fellas jumped off the shore and paddled out in the Niles, in the Narwhal, Nari, whatever you want to pronounce it, our canoe, and they came out there, and it was almost a shooting incident. And the officer in the charge on the day allowed them to take a few fish. He realised what was going on, and they sort of let the British go. But in April of that year, another massive big haul of mullet was made, and this was huge. And the men actually from our people, we came across onto the boat, and we actually boarded the ship. We boarded the British ship. Muskets were drawn, and it was almost a full-scale battle. However, the officer of the day once again told his men to stand down, and they shared the fish, and our people went back to the shore, and it wasn't done. That officer was actually, had court-martial was used against him. He was only a young officer, but he showed some ecological sense, some common sense, because our men were trying to get the fish out of the nets back into the water, because they realised that if you took all the fish, there'd be no fish next season. And what happened in June and July of 1788, yes, the very first year of occupation, our people were starving. They were starving because there was no longer any fish. The game had been driven away, the kangaroo, the emu, the heavy meat was gone, but the fish were gone. Now, traditionally the fish go into deeper water in winter time, but there still are a lot of fish around the edges that we can catch. Now, by the winter of the first year of occupation of this country, of invasion of boat people, we were starving. So disease had already started in that first 6 months. Sydney Harbour has never looked back. It has been on a downward spiral ever since, and I was going to show you some beautiful pictures of Sydney Harbour, but I want to draw your attention to a couple of sites. And if you can think of Sydney Harbour, think of a topographic map, and think of Sydney Harbour without any water in it, because a lot of our stories actually are of Sydney Harbour with no water in it, and that's why we call it Tobuggawa, which is the river valley. And there was this little snaky little windy river, which is a river that comes from Tears, Biami, our creator. When she created this land, Biami is our god. For Sydney, she is a woman. The north coast, south coast, and inland, she's a male. But you know, it's matrilineal land, so God is a woman here. that river was formed from her tears. And it's similar to the Genesis story, the Garden of Eden. And when her son broke the law, she cried, and with the tears came the water. The water flowed across the land, and the salt water has always been salty, as are your tears. So that river has a very strong connection. It's the umbilical cord to creation. When the valley flooded, obviously the ocean came in, but our delineation, the edge of our land, if you know Athol Bay and if you know Bradley's Head, that was actually the edge of our country. And being matrilineal land, it was very strong women's law. And if you stood on Bradley's Head, and if you walked down, you would actually walk down a very steep cliff. And the river was very narrow and it was very fast. It then meandered around, and if you know where the shoals are, where the rocks in the middle of the bay, in the middle of the harbour, the river ran around to the east of there. And it was quite flat. And if you look at a topographic map now, you'll see that the eastern trench is all horrible, and it's a horrible piece of dredging. The western trench is a nice straight line. That's been dug out of a hill. But there's now a big floodplain of mud, and that was where our people used to traverse and come across. However, the women used to come down off the side of Bradley's Head, down into either Athol Bay or the other side. They would traverse the creek or the river where it was running fairly narrow. They would cut across there, either swim or, as it got a bit higher, with canoe. And then they would walk up a very large winding hill. Now, on the eastern side, there's a gorge where the waterfall at Rose Bay used to come down. And that used to feed that side of the river that fed into Tobacco, which is now the Parramatta River. And so you have this massive big mountain that comes up. The top of that mountain is Shark Island. Now, when the New South Wales National Parks and Wildlife were doing consultation, and I use that with inverted commas because the consultation was total lip service, about the usage of Shark Island, we told them all these stories. We told them the significance of Shark Island. Shark Island is a woman's area. The whole ridge of land from Bradley's Head, Athol Bay, all the way across to the southern side of what is now Sydney Harbour is a delineation of our country, the edge of our country. When the water came in, our country moved to the west, but prior to then that was the delineation. And if any divers are here and they know where the Currajong is, a little bit inland from the Currajong there's a large rock shelf that collapsed when the harbour flooded. And on that rock shelf is a massive engravings which delineate the matrilineal land base. And the creation stories of that area. It's an incredible. I've never been down there. It's all oral history, and that's from the last ice age because that's the last time that's exposed. So and that rock shelf collapse has actually collapsed since the last ice age. But you know, when you look at Sydney Harbour, it's not just the stories above the harbour or in the water. It's also the terrestrial story on the land underneath the harbour. Aboriginal people hold that very close to their hearts. They hold it very dear. Shark Island is an amazing place. It's linked to Athol Bay. And in that hole where Athol Bay is and where that gorge once ran, where the river ran fast, is where the eel woman lived. And the eel woman used to take sacrifice, and she would steal the young men. And in our story, in our cycle of life, we know that every 11, maybe 20,000 years, the water comes up and down. And when the water gets to the bay of, into the Cave of Secrets, which is in, got to remember my suburbs, in Mossman. There's a cave there, it's called the Cave of Secrets, and when the water level gets up there, it's about another 18 feet to go, that's when the eel woman will come up, take a young man, and then the water levels will drop. So we know about the change in water levels. It's been a part of our life. We call it Gani or Tagani, the time of fire or the time of ice, and that determines the water levels. But more importantly, getting back to the fishing stories, in 1789, there was three Mr. Ferguson and two British soldiers, and another person were out fishing in the bay, and they were fishing roughly around Sow and Pigs Reef, and a whale attacked them, and the whale smashed their boat, and it kept coming back and smashing them again and again and again until it drowned three of them. One guy swam to safety. Now, the oral history is that our people were so cheesed off about all the fish being taken out of the harbour and the fish being stolen that when this whale came into the harbour, it was a different species. It wasn't a southern right, it wasn't a humpback, it wasn't a sperm, it wasn't a pilot whale, it was a different breed. And our people saw that as a sign, and the women sang that whale and said, please go and kill those guys. First time we'd shown hatred against the British. 3 people were killed. That whale subsequently died in Sydney Harbour, got washed up at Manly Beach, or on inland of Manly Beach, the Manly or Collins, and I won't get into an argument. We believe it's Collins, but anyway, all the experts tell us it wasn't. Anyway, when Phillip went over there, as you know, Phillip got speared. A few weeks after Phillip got out of hospital, Governor Phillip got out of hospital, was the last major catch of fish in Sydney Harbour. 4,000 fish averaging 5 pounds in weight each. And the early British called these salmon, and possibly they were either diamond scale mullet, or they would have been the Australian salmon. We're not sure of the species, but they referred to them as salmon. 4,000 fish. They gave 12 to Bennelong as a token gesture of goodwill. But 4,000 fish were raped out of that water. Now that would have fed our people for a long time. That fish never came back in the harbour again. The whales never came back in the harbour again. Around Ball's Head was a whaling area where the humpbacks and the southern rights would give birth. Where the northern stand of the harbour bridge is at the moment, there was once a rock shelf there, a big rock wall with a full-size engraving of a sperm whale, because the sperm whales wouldn't go any further up the harbour. The harbour was alive. It was our life. It was everything. We nurtured it, we cared for it, we looked after it, it fed us, it looked after us. It provided generations of sustenance. But the most important thing is the harbour was alive. It was the Venice of Australia. We used its waterways just like the gondolas use Venice. We used the currents to go up and down. We moved around. It was alive with boats. And you've seen, I had some beautiful graphics of some of those early drawings from the First Fleet of our people, fishing, etc. It was something that was very special. So when I read in some of the literature that's been sent around by commercial fishermen, or by the hobby fishermen that want to stop banning of fishing in Sydney Harbour, my goodness, think back to 1788. Because of overfishing, you almost wiped out a race, and for many of us, the Gadigal, they're gone. I'm related to the Gadigal through the Boorrigal, so I'm a North Shore person, but I can speak and look after this country because that's the weight of the burden that I've been given, is to protect this country as well as my own, because the people here are gone. They were a sister clan, and and that was done through overfishing. Overfishing brought the dietary deficiencies, which then allowed disease to come in. So when people say, oh, we should be able to fish, we should be able to do this and do that, just think back to 1788. That's when it all began. And I'll leave it on that note. Digirigo, thank you.